they have at this moment no natural enemies. So like any predator in that condition, there is nothing to stop them from, in fact, doing more and more of this. Fortunately, I have been asked to lecture tomorrow at the National Convention of the Institute of Traffic Engineers for 3 hours. So, I assure you, it is about the first opposition they will have met in years. They are like gods because, you know, they are considered the solution and the only solution to the problem. What is it like? What are the economic implications of this kind of investment in highways? Here on the left is the illustration on the cover of the annual report of the Florida Department of Transportation. This is obviously what they have in mind for us in Florida. Now, what has been achieved here is something which is extraordinary. They have turned a little old urban four-laner, just a four-lane street going through an urbanized area, into a highway, you know, by these enormous high-speed geometries that have been applied. As a result of this, not only has a lot of land been consumed and a lot of money been consumed, but the real estate value on either side has been actually devastated by the perceived, actually the reality of high-speed traffic. All of these things along the edge, in fact, have lower real estate value. Take an alternate model. This is Paris. And I could show you slides of San Francisco or slides of Washington. The difference is, I should go back to this, is that this is a highway and this is an avenue. A highway has a place in the countryside, but whenever a highway enters a city, it should lose its high-speed geometries and become an avenue. An avenue has entirely different requirements. This is an avenue going through a city. Notice that there are 4 high-speed lanes, 2 low-speed lanes, and 6 lines of parking, plus trees, sidewalks, and buildings. And people who consider it perfectly fine to cross and perfectly fine to sit in a cafe and have a nice cup of coffee. This is not a person that considers himself unfortunate to be there. On the contrary, very fortunate to be there. How did Paris pay for its infrastructure? Because Paris was entirely reconstructed in the 19th century without any tax dollars or tax francs or whatever it was they had at the time. The way they did it is by building avenues like these, which were so elegant and so desirable that they increased real estate value on the side. First they condemned land, then they built the avenue, then they sold it to developers, and with the value added they paid for the infrastructure. Not only the streets, but the sewers and the schools. All of that, and the new water system was paid for by this system. So instead of destroying real estate value, they enhanced real estate value. Everything that you see here in detail is illegal now. The distance to the tree, the cars parked, this system of the service way with only this much distance between the two, everything here is illegal. You can't do it. Despite the evidence that a city of 11 million people, it works perfectly for them. And these are not some weird Europeans, you know. These are perfectly modern people that know exactly what they're doing. But we're not permitted to do this any longer. We can only do that. What does it do to and how are our intersections handled? Well, this is the old system. This is Washington, D.C. This intersection here has tremendous capacity to distribute traffic. It also has the capacity to make a wonderful park in the center and to make fantastic, elegant building sites that can be sold for a high real estate return. All of this in an area about the same size as 1/4 of a clover leaf. This area that modern traffic engineering requires is 120 acres. That's the size of Renaissance Florence. Every time you see one of these, you know, that's what is being taken out of commission. The amount of wastage that is implied by this is not only the $7 million it costs to build one of these, excluding land acquisition costs. It is the taking out of the land and the reduction of real estate value that occurs all along its edges. All of these units rent for less, and mostly you want to have parking lots on them. It's a fantastically stupid way to do things. You know what you gain? 10 seconds on the way home, in your commute home, as if that mattered when you were commuting an hour and a half anyway. But that's what you gain. You have the pleasure of not even touching your brake as you make that curve. This comes from a period in America when we were so wealthy that we were permitted to be dumb. For 40 years we have done planning the planning of the rich and the stupid. Now, fortunately, we no longer have the money. This is no longer a rich country. You might have noticed that. It happens, there are headlines in the newspaper every day, there's no money for anything. We have now gone back to be a poor country, which is fine because we were a poor country for the first 150 years of our existence. And in those years when we were a poor country, we were smart. This was a poor, smart country. And we used to do things like this. And all we have to do, not feel sorry for ourselves that we're now poor, but simply get smart again. This, in many ways, was a better world than this one. Some people that suffer, specific people that suffer or benefit from traditional urbanism, police departments benefit. This is one of the great hopeful signs or hopeful interventions in police practice, which is the patrolman on the beat. Washington and New York have instituted this. Instead of responding to crime in patrol cars, policemen are assigned several city blocks, and they walk it. And they get to know the people, and they can tell that they're able to identify crime before it happens. New York City reported last week in the New York Times that crime had dropped 10% in New York, which is remarkable, and it might have something to do with these people. By the way, the cops like it. They like to do this. This can't be done in cul-de-sacs. It's actually technically impossible to do this. Developers. The most sophisticated developers of Florida are VITA, that get the very best marketing advice, the most expensive, the best, the most thorough marketing advice. What they find time after time after time is that the hometown is what sells real estate. Villages, towns, town centers, neighborhoods, it is these words. If developers deliver this, they have absolutely no problem selling. Other people who suffer, senior citizens. Florida is full of people who have gone to retire in Florida, in suburban neighborhoods or in golf course communities. What they don't realize is that they need to re-retire. Because what happens is that as soon as they lose their driver's license, which happens when their eyes go bad, not when their minds go bad or when they get physically in bad shape, but when their eyes go bad, they can no longer lead an independent existence. And they do two things. They either go back to New Jersey, there's a fantastic out-migration from Florida, where they go back to where they started, or they go into specialized retirement communities, which are dreadful places usually, where everything is taken care of. Wherever traditional neighborhoods exist, gentlemen like this one can get to be very, very old and still live independently because they can get to their daily needs by walking. This is in Country Club Plaza in Kansas City, which is a development which is done like a traditional neighborhood. Wonderfully successful place. The seniors suffer, and they don't properly identify it. By the way, seniors, South Carolina did a study recently, must have been this year, about where people would prefer to retire. 65% wanted to retire to small towns. I don't know how many wanted to retire to golf course communities, but all I can tell you is that of the people who retire in golf course communities, only 27% play golf. And those are the ones within golf course communities. What people really want are towns. They're just not being provided yet by developers. Other people who suffer, and these might be the greatest sufferers of all, are kids. Now this is unexpected because people move to the suburbs thinking that it's going to be good for their kids. In fact, it is good for their kids to have a house and a lot. What's not good is that the kids can't get anywhere without being driven by parents. Everything they need. You give your kid an allowance, the kid has to beg to be driven somewhere to spend it. The kids are delivered to the house at 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the school bus. If you don't want them warehoused in front of the television set, you need one or another of the parent needs to become a chauffeur. That has been the case with my sister in Miami. She was a journalist. She had 2 children. For the last 8 years, she has been a chauffeur. That has been her profession. On weekends, they call parents. Parents call each other to arrange for baseball games. And they have to put up with watching the baseball game for 2 hours so they can drive the kid back and so forth. Whatever happened to the system of the kid walking down to the school and just, picking up a bat and playing baseball? The kids are completely incapacitated as independent beings in suburban conditions. Many people grew up in neighborhoods like this, where kids in neighborhoods. There's still a great memory in the United States of that. And they come up to me after the lectures and they confirm that it was wonderful when in fact they could get to school, they could get to the corner store, they could get to the movies. That is quickly disappearing. And there are kids that were actually, that led 2 lives, that grew up in a neighborhood and then at 13 or 14 they were taken out to the suburbs, and they come to me and say, now I understand why I became an unhappy person at 14. It wasn't puberty, it was the inability to actually have any freedom.